Everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
So I'm just enjoying my Maxwell Outsider book, Compliments of Divulgence podcast, Jordan Vasquez, and I was flipping through some tarot cards. The first one I got was the King of Swords, followed by the Page of Wands, that guy, and then I had an version of Judgment. And as you know, QAnon Shaman is now America Shaman. He's out on the streets having fun and selling new merchandise. So that felt like an inverted Judgment. There's also Italian secret intelligence agents who died in a boat accident this weekend. And then the Ibiza affair that Raf is bringing up. We'll get into that. There's just so much going on. Erdogan won the election. How crazy is this week, right? That's pretty cool. I'm Andreas. I'm glad you're here with Neuropa. Rafael, how are you?
Welcome, everyone. Doing great. Thank you.
I mean, I'm really trying to catch up. I'm not there yet, but we're gonna become allies. And then SJ Anderson, a brilliant man who's in Albania right now, and he's been studying a lot of stuff. Let me pull up actually your Twitter so people can check out some of the stuff that you put up. All kinds of horoscope, esoteric information. So you fit in with our synchronicity research group. Do you want to maybe explain what you do and why you do it and what interests you?
Absolutely, Alex. Thanks for having me here. Thank you, Rafael. Really glad to be here and reconnect with you guys. I'm an astrologer. I'm a professional astrologer, so that's what I do. I read charts for folks. This is more of my kind of professional side of my content. But I'm just kind of more I'm tweeting often sort of easily digestible comments about the movement of the planets. Occasionally I'll or I will move into more esoteric and kind of hardcore synchronistic topics, but less so on my Twitter. That's more for kind of the after party and the kind of non-professional side of what I do. But I have a whole lineage back with SyncBook. I see you have David Platon and others. I mean, I'm deep down these rabbit holes for a long time. So, but I brought in I became a professional astrologer. So, you'll see me talking on that channel, both Twitter and YouTube, all about astrology.
That's rad. So astrology comes up a lot. Some people think that it's ridiculous, but then I think more and more people think the idea that it's ridiculous or that we understand it are parallel. So it's probable that, I think Mach said this, right? Like Mach speed, that the idea that everything doesn't affect us is crazier than the idea that we completely understand how it affects us. It's more likely though that it affects us than it doesn't, like the reality and the mass and everything around us. Do you think it's possible that we really do understand astrology, the effects of astrology, or is it more subtle than that and you can use it to kind of intuit truths about our choices? Well, how does it work?
Yeah, I think it's more of like a symbolic matrix of reality, working closer to something like synchronicity than any kind of physics and sort of scientific measurement. So, consciousness is what's ensouling everything, the meaning, the stories we tell, the way we view reality. It comes from the inside of the human being, the divine spark, so-called. So that's that's how I think about it, is we are ensouled, our physical human form, our form is ensouled by God, and then therefore we create meaning. The strange thing about astrology, though, is that you can look up there and see it every night, and they're there where they're supposed to be. And these planets, there's something about the outside of the body physical part of whatever this is we're in that we measure and map, and then those correspondences then hit pretty hard in our lives quite regularly, and it's profound, when you lock into those kind of channels of meaning. So it's a weird kind of thing.
Well, someone had asked me, or someone had told me about this idea that they didn't originally believe in astrology themselves, but because they went to physical anthropology and they took sociology over the years in college, they found that because so many civilizations did believe in astrology and had made decisions in terms of generational breeding of their cultures based on when they thought these people would be Libras or Virgo, that maybe even though they didn't believe in it before, that we manifested this and made it real. Do you think there's any truth to that we might have epigenetically created some astrological truth to our science? Just because we believe in it so much for generations?
Absolutely. And arguably you might say that if we all believed hard enough that Saturn didn't exist, it wouldn't exist anymore.
Right. Yeah.
That's how powerful I think we may be,
That's kind of, so that sounds like a hypothetical, but there's the history of Saturn being completely different than the way we look at it now. And it might be connected to this. The other thought is if the poles are shifting and astrology is changing, do you think that we'll be able to pace with that, or would we still be genetically aligned with the way the stars were in the constellation of Leo or something like that, and it takes us a while to catch up with the changes of nature?
I'm open. I mean, I think a pole shift, what would actually be happening in a pole shift? I don't think we would even scientifically understand now what that actually is. And it may be some kind of hard reset in the deep kind of God programming of reality that we don't even have words to articulate. And so if that happens, some kind of deep reconfiguration at a core level, I mean, who knows what the reality that we witness will look like on the other side of that. It may be like a green sky with little black dots up there that are completely different. I mean, the whole thing's in play for rearrangement would be my answer to that. And I have no idea what it would look like on the other side. We'd probably notice it and measure it and begin to create meaning, though, around what we see anew would be my thing. And that's the core of astrology, meaning making based on observation of the sky.
Meaning making. So that kind of answered what I was going to ask, is you think essentially we're the reality, I guess you called it already, kind of a mathematical, say it, what are we living in? What is this?
Boy, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I mean, a globe model seems to work, spherical trigonometry works, but yet there's this idea of a projected kind of plasma thing. I kind of think it's trippier, more Truman Show than it is what I might be taught in like my astrophysics course at university, but I don't think we really know. I think it's the great mystery. And I just tend to like set in the mystery, rest in the mystery. All I know is my software that I use, they get the calculations from JPL, Jack Parsons Labs.
Yeah.
And that's in public. Okay. And then astrologers use that data to code in the same style of mathematical calculation that goes all the way back to the Hellenistic period. And that map that I look at every day for clients and from my social media and everything, that map appears to be accurate when I can go out at night and see when the moon rises, when the sun sets, where the planets are supposed to be. So something's accurate about that measurement. Now, what it is, who knows? I mean, have you guys seen the like Nikon 9000? Is it like the P9000, that really high-end Nikon camera? And they'll shine it at the sky and it looks weird and watery and kind of crystalline and just strange when you really focus in on what's up there. And so I don't really know, guys. I mean, I would be raked over the coals here from other mainstream astrologers. Most astrologers are kind of mainstream, and for me to even be saying this, they'd be like, "You're crazy, you're insane." And whatever NASA says is true. What the textbooks say is true. We have a ball, and we can travel there with satellites. And I'm just skeptical by nature. I don't know. All I know is we can see it. We're ensouled. Humans are. And then we can kind of project our soul through meaning on these people around us. I mean, that's really what life is, isn't it? Two souls exchanging meaning. And then we just use astrology as the idiom or the excuse to kind of exchange meaning with another human soul. Astrology wouldn't exist without two humans. You need two or more. It's like that thing of two or more people in the Bible is God in the room. It's the same. It works the same.
That's Martin Buber talked about unanimity -1. And so you can divide things up into 6 billion, 8 billion, 12 billion, but it's a lot easier to divide them into two. I and thou, unanimity -1. And then from there, you can do more subtle math. You're like, yes. I agree. I feel good. All right, that's good. I feel like I'm catching on. But with Jack Parsons then, because Jack Parsons is such a, I mean, I love him, but I think at the time, most people thought he was a weirdo, and they were trying to and they thought rockets were weird because he was into them, just on principle. They were, granted, there was this whole racist, anti-Chinese sentiment about rockets, which I find kind of interesting. But what do you think about Jack Parsons? And I mean, he was interested in math, science, astrology, astronomy, all of it.
Yeah, American genius, man. He's the classic, guy working in his garage, changing the world. And we need more Jack Parsons, I think, in this day and age. And I look up, I mean, I don't know that much about him. Maybe he was like a pure scumbag or something in his personal life, but certainly what I've seen, that TV show they made, that adaptation of his life, that was wonderful. And
LA was a scumbag. He was just a nice boy in Burbank, right? That was
who was a scumbag?
LA. I was just thinking because at the time, LA was treating him like he wasn't, he didn't have a college degree. He wasn't good enough. If you want to join one of our weird sex cults, that's fine. But I feel like LA was the problem for Jack.
Oh yeah. I mean, the thing is, I mean, it's all about beliefs. I think we live in a spiritual world, and there's an unseen realm, and
Yeah.
so just
I'm
that
far
he's
more into this than just like globe or flat earth, spiritual realm. I
yeah,
think that's what we need to really focus
yes,
on.
100%. And so that's what I admire about him. I mean, these guys were serious. Let's go into this unseen realm and explore and try to find out what's there. So that's noble. I think it's a noble endeavor.
I don't know if this is really connected, but it was interesting to me this yesterday, this happened, is that these information intelligence agents in Italy died. There was a capsize of this boat on Lake Maggiore, and then they found out later that there were intelligence agents, and they're still trying to figure out, like, was this seems like it probably was not necessarily an accident, kind of a dead agents in the lake there. And all across Europe, it seems like you've got a bunch of these espionage kind of cases or secret agent kind of cases, because everyone's worried about the war. They don't want their state to necessarily be in the war yet. Have you seen stuff like this? What do you think is going on? Because you're living in Europe.
Yeah, I don't, I'm more familiar with like the American style psyops that I've studied more in depth, just being from Texas and COINTELPRO and all of the deep dives in the 60s so the European style, I'm not quite as sure. My take is just, I assume that there's, agents and agent provocateurs everywhere trying to manipulate beliefs about, what's happening in the world and
we could
shaping
apply
public opinion.
We could apply some of your, knowledge about American psychological operations, because I feel like they're not so disconnected. I don't think Europe and America their intelligence agencies are as disconnected as we'd like to think. And it's interesting just because America Shaman is his new name. This is like P. Diddy or something. The artist formerly known as QAnon Shaman is selling, like, what's going to happen with this? Because this was such a big deal in terms of the psychological operations. This is the one everyone talks about, whether or not it was true, but humans, mainstream people who just QAnon is the household psyop name, right? So what's the deal with American psychological operation? What do you think about all that?
Wow. Well, the one that comes to mind recently is what is it called? Patriot March, or there's a Patriot Front. There's that group, and they're in like fresh outfits, and basically it appears to be maybe FBI, and they have masks on, and there's that meme of like the barbecue and all the six guys turn around and they all look exactly like these clean cut FBI agents,
Yeah.
I think there's probably, this benefits, the way I think about it is what benefits the party in power, or not even the political party, but just the groups in power. How do they stay in power? Well, one way is to have it's classic control your opposition. And what better opposition to have like a domestic threat that then you can control information flow and under the name of national security, etc. And we saw that in the COVID years. That's why I've been so keyed into RFK, because his Twitter feed is just basically like expose the CIA and the FBI and the domestic operations. That's like what his campaign is centered around.
Yeah, what's the deal with that? So RFK, after the QAnon Shaman and the QAnon, like all of it, like he's saying, my family were killed by the OSS or the Operation Gladio or the CIA, whatever. It was, what am I supposed to do? And this is not the way it was 20 years ago. It used to be, we had to be kind of weird to talk about it. It wasn't that the Kennedys were openly saying it. So on one hand, I'm thinking it's true, of course, but on the other hand, he's a politician. Could he be angling for power? And then also, if it is true, why didn't they say it before? Why does he feel safe enough to bring it up now? What do you think is going on with RFK?
Yeah, it's interesting because he has said that he just trusts God effectively, that if he's going to die, he's going to die. I mean, the one answer would be that he's just in his 70s and fuck it, kill me. And he's just going to, throw. Should I censor myself? I don't know. Is YouTube going to?
Normally, yeah, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Do your best, but
okay.
also
No, I'll do my best. Okay, sorry. So he's like, F it, and he's just going to go out and try to have one last truth telling,
which just stands for phalangism. Just kidding.
Phalangism.
I was just wondering, like, that's the thing you want to self-censor. I think that's the least of our worries. But
right.
Vanity.
That's kind of the irony here. Like, we're talking about,
So,
there are shorter, better words.
There's an astrological cycle, something called the Pluto Pluto, the planet of deep truth and transformation, hidden, deep, and profound power. Plutocracy is
This is huge for so many reasons. Obviously, we've talked. Last time we talked, didn't we talk a bit about Joan Quigley, Reagan's astrologer, right? And so how every single thing that Reagan did was decided by an astrologer, including Chernobyl's Pripyat false flag attack, which happened on the eclipse of Pluto, right? Which is a major point, the Pluto-plutonium eclipse, right?
Yeah. I don't know if we talked about, that's not ringing a bell. I'm curious though about that eclipse and that false flag attack. I'd like to learn more about that. Maybe we can get that up in a second, but no, so Pluto in 1776, Pluto is in late Capricorn, the degrees of late Capricorn. And it takes 240 years roughly for Pluto to go through the zodiac. We are now in 2022, 2023, and 2024, Pluto is in those same degrees. And so it's the return of Pluto to the same position it was in when the country was founded, when America was founded. And the idea is simply that you have deep truth getting uncovered.
Pluto 58 degrees.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
No, I'm gonna full screen this, guys, so I can see that. This is Pluto sextile Pluto 58 degrees, Chernobyl nuclear disaster. 3 Mile Island. This is the Fukushima explosion. And is this the eclipse? Is there an eclipse?
Is this the Fukushima one?
This is right near Fukushima. There is an eclipse, a lunar eclipse right near Fukushima. But, so RFK's just come out and said, the masks are off. I'm going to go to the deep reality of the situation. None of this fluff. The CIA killed my uncle. They killed my dad. And the CIA basically was involved in COVID. That's the thing that's I'm most impressed with. He's got gloves off with the COVID years, and he's showing the Whitney Webb research that talks about the CIA, like the DARPA developed mRNA. I mean, all of the deep truth about the whole thing.
Right. This is the thing. So even the media, they're trying to figure out what to do about it, because let's remember, okay, so QAnon was, and we both thought, we knew people that were very into it. We knew people that were like, this is completely nonsense. I feel like we were looking for the cynical approach and see where there's some truth in it. So when COVID hit, I thought to myself, well, here is something, because they did talk about these days of silence and the storm, and that people would be locked in their houses. Is there a lot of the parallels were there for a Nostradamus prediction about COVID? Do you really think that do you believe that there was a connection between these things? Were they warning people about something?
Maybe. I mean, it could also just be predictive programming. I mean, letting
we're all
know.
Expecting it. Millions of people expecting something.
Yeah, and so I think I remember talking to Plate, for example. He's on the show regularly, right? And
yeah.
We were talking in 2019, and I was keyed into an astrological cycle with the lunar nodes, the eclipse points, and the signs they're in. And this relates to RFK, actually, because those lunar nodes in Capricorn and Cancer, when they were North Node in Cancer, South Node in Capricorn, every 18 and a half years, that repeats. And you go 9/11, 18 and a half years before AIDS, or some of the height of the Cold War, 18 and a half years before Kennedy's killed, 18 and a half years before Hiroshima happens. So every cycle, there's this intensity to the American experience when the nodes are there. And I had my pinned tweet for like a year, what's going to happen in 2022? And of course, we knew it was the 3/11 event, however you want to think about that. That 3/11 number, right? The World Health Organization says it's a global emergency now. Those bonds that were betting on a pandemic start paying out as soon as they made that announcement. But Plate was keyed into the 9th Tarantino film and the 9th Star Wars film, that there was something about the ending of these major mythopoetic film film series that are so important to the collective. So we're all expecting something in 2020. And Pluto joined Saturn. That was a big deal. Astrologers were freaked out about. Pluto-Saturn conjunction happens every 40 years.
Why is that so creepy? And is it just the myth, or what is the deal with Pluto and Saturn?
So Saturn, there are 2 points that signify, and this is how astrologers talk about planets. It's the significations of the planets, basically the meanings that the planets carry with them. And Saturn is death. I mean, it's like the darkest father time, decay.
Hades, yeah, it's mean. Yeah.
And Pluto is similar, the Hades and the underworld and deep death transformation.
Tartarus, right.
you bring these together, and it's like two of the roughest symbols meeting, so everybody's freaked. Like, what the
Right.
fuck?
It's kind of so in some of the old astrologer farmer almanac things, they've talked like they're saying this is kind of the Persephone Hades thing, or when the Bible says that people are held underground and then eventually there's like a calling to go to the afterlife period. So like that might there's a that there might be something to that too, like a mystical energy release that occurs every 18 and a half years.
Yeah, for sure. And the other layer is that there's people that have power and ritual, and we know that some of the higher level circles of the so-called, them or whoever the power structure is, eyes wide shut type groups, they're into astrology. I mean, why
Right.
wouldn't they be?
Millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do, quote from JP Morgan, right? Yeah.
Yes. And so they knew about these cycles, and there's a bunch of cycles. I'm going to save you guys because I don't want to nerd out here on
Well, we
everything,
love
but
it. You do what you like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, people can go to my channel. It's all, I mean, I talk about stuff there. They can message me, go DM me on Twitter or email me on my website if you have questions. But basically, yeah, these heavy hitting cycles come, and there you go. You get this inversion and this transformation of reality at a fundamental level. And here we are in the aftermath of that. And I love it, man. I love being in this kind of postmodern, postmodern, high internet kind of, diffuse, decentralized, dispersed wasteland that we're in, and like in this field of fringe, so-called, we had like Art Bell in the 90s. It was all centralized in a few voices. And then the early internet and the aughts, where you got a few websites like Red Ice or Alex Jones or David Icke or a few forums. But then when social media comes, it gets even more diffuse and decentralized. And now I think it's more than ever, like there's people out there, we'll never know about unless you kind of stumble into their reality frame and view. It's very much multiplicity of reality right now.
Can you see anything in astrology that like predicts that would be what would happen now? I mean, it seems like this year we're like not going to have debates, for instance, in a lot of elections next year or internationally. They might take the trend of not having debates. We're going to not have information as much as so much less information, so much more nonsense, right? Is that on purpose? Is that part of physics of astrology?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the main cycle that we're in now is something called the elemental shift that happens when Jupiter and Saturn meet every 20 years. And as of 2020, December, they are now continuously every 20 years meeting in the air element and signs of the air element, which is an element of digitization and technology. The last time this cycle happened was during the Mongol Empire. Exactly. It hits, the Mongols rise for 200 years. The cycle ends, the Mongols go away. What did the Mongols do? They created networks of trade and technological interchange. They built effectively a technological empire using all of the tech from China that then came through the Silk Road into Europe. And we have now entered a phase similar to that. It began in 1980, and then it was a window of a transition, 40-year period until 2020. Now it's continuous. What happens in 1980? Personal computer, internet, 1990. And so we're in this digitized age where, I was just seeing this. You might find this interesting. Someone posted this image where they removed in China. There was tons of protesters in a police station. The AI, like this new Photoshop tool that got released, how you can press a button, tell it remove this, and it just effortlessly removes it. They're going to use that. I realized when I saw this story, what's going to happen is that we don't even know. The resistance actually won't be televised. We always thought it would be, right? Internet's everywhere. But now you press a button, you can just remove in real time anything.
David Plato always said the revolution will be uploaded, downloaded, deleted, uploaded again, and it'll start to lose resolution 1,000 times. But yeah.
But the AI bomb has dropped, man. And now they're going to like in real time change it. We don't even know what's real anymore, more than we ever have. And it's wild. It's trippy. It relates to the age of air that we're in, all digital mediation. And I think we'll have to discover anew what it means to be human at some kind of core level. I mean, we're not going away. Human beings are still here. I mean, there's too many of us that love life and love our spiritual core.
Well, what about transhumanism, right? Because we've got people that have augmented their DNA in one way or another. I think a lot of people, and it's going to be interesting how many people stay human next. Do you think it's going to be at least a number of people won't be as human? Is this the point of divergence?
100%, because where I live, you can go to villages just like 50 miles outside of where I live. tiny villages, nothing's there. People are still like gardens and cows, and there's kids running around with no phones. I mean, there's going to be some real humans in the world in these regions where there's, they're not going to require a QR code on the phone or embedded in the body to get your groceries. That shit's not going to fly where I am. I can tell you that. And like hundreds of thousands or, 500,000 people at least just won't have any part to play.
You're in Albania, right?
Yeah, I'm in Albania. And the Islamic world is the other answer too. I know that's been big the last year with Andrew Tate's conversion and just kind of the rise of some of the. And you guys were your friend in Britain, David, I think was his name. I mean, he's been really into Islam for a while.
That's what I was. So my whole rant that I just was thinking about, because for instance, okay, first off, there's Tune In Tomorrow, which I brought up because as soon as I think of Albania, it's kind of like how when I think of Degrassi because of Canada, the first thing I think of Albania is this movie with Keanu Reeves and Harvey Keitel, or is it Steve? What's his name? No. That's
the guy who played Peter Falk. That's Peter
Falk.
Falk.
Yeah, it's Peter
Even
Falk.
Better.
Crazy, good movie. And basically, it starts out with Peter Falk laughing while he's on a typewriter as they're burning down the radio station, and he jumps out the window and he goes to the next town, and the next town he destroys them with radio. And the whole time he's making this beautiful radio drama which is inspiring everybody, but he's constantly putting the lines in, I'd rather be an Albanian sheep herder than to go off with her, or those dirty Albanians with their wild sexual fervent energy, and you have to be careful about Albania. And they're like, why are you so against Albanians? Like, I'm not, I just need to pick on somebody. And the Albanians are an interesting group because they've always been picked on because they were Janissaries. If you think about it, they were picked to be Muslim, and they were courted in a time when most other groups were told you couldn't be Muslim because we need to make you pay taxes. So there was something going on. They're like, well, we trust the Albanians and we can bring them into our families, into the Umayyad tribes, which is interesting. And so you've got a very weird fusion Islamic culture, which is more intellectual and descendant from Tartarian Islam. But I mean, how Islamic is Albania today? Because isn't it really kind of secular because of the Soviets and everything?
Yeah, well, Enver Hoxha was the dictator. It was the North Korea of Europe for about 50 years. They actually were so communist. They first fell out with Stalin or with Khrushchev because he sold out to the West in the 60s. Then they were allied with Mao only. And then they fell out with Mao in the 70s when Nixon and China happened. And they basically called out the communist regimes as sellouts. Right. And then closed off for a whole decade from everybody. And it was the most intense, pure thing. Yeah, but when you live here now, it's very free. It's like being held underwater, and then you come up, you take that breath. You really feel people here that love their freedom after not being able to leave the country for 10 years. They killed, I think, 5,000 people over the course of the Hoxha regime trying to leave at the borders. They executed them trying to leave. Here, it's very secular. Yeah, I think it's the only place where religion was actually outright banned altogether officially. I mean, other places it was discouraged, but here, you could die or be jailed for it.
Wow.
And now it's very cosmopolitan. No one cares. There is Orthodox, Catholic, Islam. They're all intermixing, very accepting. But there is the rise of conservative Islam that's happening all over the world is also creeping in here. The Salafist Sunni Islam has come in here. They're building a big mosque that Erdogan paid for. You mentioned him at the beginning. So you do have a radical Islam here, but most locals don't like that. They view it as kind of inauthentic and just an outsider ideology. But yeah, there's something special here. First of all, no one knows about it. Even today, people don't even have any idea what it is or where it is. It's very hidden still. I don't even want to, I'm so hidden. I'm like, I don't even want to mention it because I don't want, there's a certain, that's how it feels here. You get here and you're like, what the hell is this? It's a very different way of life. And you feel it strongly, for sure.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, it's weird because when we talk about Islam, it is so diverse. There really are different kinds of Islam. There's a super intellectual Islam that's liberated and allowed to do whatever it wants to do. And then there's just levels and levels away from that, the people that are trying to enforce it. Don't really understand if they're trying to enforce it, ironically.
And the history of Islam is so fascinating. It was the most powerful and populous religion in Europe. Right. Actually, in the first half of the last millennia. I mean, Islam dominated Europe. Now, they don't want you to know that. That was hidden from my education. And
but isn't it coming back, right? And that's the Ibiza affair, I think Rafa is talking about. I don't know if that's exactly the way to put it. I mean,
this is more about something different. So, and this is also, if we're okay to switch over, Astrid, because I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is like an excursus into, you know, the petty politics of the Austrian province, let's say, only 8 million inhabitants officially. But why is this interesting? So, you know, people always talk, is there something like election meddling? Is there something like media manipulation happening? It's going to be interesting when you start researching these people now. So,
Yeah, what do you think about Ramin?
So I'm not necessarily going to comment on him. All I'm going to
He reminds me of the founder of eBay. Keep going.
Oh, well, note what you just said. All right. So basically, as you can see here, Ibizagate, this was a big scandal happening on 17th of May 2019. In between, this may be a date SJ may want to look up. Basically, a video had been created, as you see on the picture, in June 2017. Maybe you want to go on Ibiza video, or what I send in the chat, just so people can see what this is actually about. If you scroll up on the chat, yeah, this one. So just, you don't need to, yeah, you can just let it roll like this. This was a undercover, how would you say, observation, undercover footage that was taken in Ibiza. Who you see here, the guy talking right now, gesticulating with his hands, is HC Strache. He was the leader of the so-called Freedom Party, some would say populist, quote-unquote, right-wing party. And they actually, in 2017, at this point, they had not been in government, but I guess it was clear that they were rising for, I think, about 10 years in strength. And this had been recorded 2017, which basically shows him talking with this woman in the back, which was actually a fake oligarch, supposedly Russian oligarch, but she was apparently, potentially, a prostitute or something along those lines. And basically, they got tricked. They got tricked into talking with them for 7 hours. Potentially, they were drugged or drunk alcohol or something. Here, the guy is showing this weapon sign because they talk about the company called Glock, which is one of the, you know, important weapons companies. And they basically talked about, you know, ways how they could get money. They talked about potentially buying the most important newspaper in Austria. They talked about the Austrian water supply. But the main thing here being that this was a 7-hour recording in 2017. And then in 2019, when this guy you see right here was the vice chancellor, and the government overall was the most popular that Austria had in many decades, they released this video. But only 2 minutes of the video, which basically put them in a super bad light. So they had to withdraw, they had to step down, and the government basically had to reform. For 9 months, there was a so-called expert government, basically appointed by the strongest party, which is the ÖVP, so the People's Party, let's say. And then they had re-elections. Of course, particularly interesting, considering that it could be that some forces somewhere already knew that 2020 something's about to happen. And this party, the proponents you see right here, who then got, exiled from their party. But even after they left, this party was the only one in parliament that consistently allowed for any kind of criticism or opposition to measurements that were taken, so on and so forth. So that's the big question. And then, ever since that was released, it was a huge thing for many weeks. Every year there is shows on all Austrian TV channels. Once again, anniversary for Ibiza. Look how bad the Freedom Party is. And only now, and that's the other video I sent where I said reference only interview, just so people can see it for themselves. There have been a few researchers, and finally they discovered, because they always asked, okay, there was a guy called Julian Thaler, who was the guy filming it. By now already, this guy is free again and touring the world or something. He's somehow related to Correctiv, which is a fact-checking website. And now finally they were wondering, was it a secret service? How did they get the money? Because they offered it to the Socialist Party, the document they offered to different people. Even Jan Böhmermann, who is one of the most popular German comedians, made a joke about Ibiza a few weeks before it was released. Also, the Austrian Chancellor at that point, Sebastian Kurz, made a reference in a talk show to Ibiza. So it seems that people already knew about this. But now, and that's the real reason I'm bringing this up, and sorry for the long, contextualization, it was finally discovered who sent the money. Because it was funneled through Correctiv, which is this German fact-checker site. And now we come back to your initial intuition. The receipt or the main money that had been sent and funneled through came from a company called Omidyar Network Foundation. Omidyar Omidyar Network Foundation. It's with an IDYAR. Yes, here we are.
Oh
here.
my God! Did you You didn't just no, not really, right? It's not tied to Pierre Omidyar, is it?
And the funny thing is, this was mentioned in one interview. I didn't see any reports referencing this again. No one is mentioning this. No one talks about this. And I think in Austria, unless someone really, really properly heard that interview, no one is even wondering
You're
about
saying
it.
Omidyar,
Yes,
Pierre Omidyar,
yes.
the founder of
Network.
eBay, and
The Network Foundation
my brain's
was on the
melting.
receipt.
I feel like ice cream is melting in my ears right now. This is brutal. So the thing about Pierre Omidyar, and I've gone off unsaid, like I don't hate this guy. Fight me on it. Like somebody prove me wrong.
And just to be clear, it was not his personal account, but is what is Omidyar Network Foundation, who apparently provided the funding to get this whole thing going and make sure to have these recordings.
Pierre's hyper isolated and has been for like 20 years. He lives on an island in Hawaii, and if you want to talk to him, you need to go onto a Second Life network and chat with him in his Second Life server. The dude is completely isolated, and it's amazing. However, that might also be to his benefit because he's trying to stay away from the Silicon Valley, which became this royal court of gossip and everything else. And yeah, he donates to the Democratic Party. But isn't that kind of like donating to the local police department so you stay alive? I don't know. I'm just saying I don't hate Pierre Omidyar yet. And I would love it if someone gave me more reasons to, so I could be clear on that. But so far, I think he's done a lot of really amazing, interesting things. And he got pushed out of eBay so that they could take it over. The CIA and whatever wants to control the private exchanges going on. The only free market exchanges that were going on in the late 90s were probably on eBay. I mean, I don't know, but the fact that he runs this major journal, and I was thinking about this recently, his First Look Media and his Omidyar Network, there's so much. He's got a think tank. He owns the Civil Beat in Honolulu. He's got so much control over public opinion. Wouldn't that be the thing you'd want to do if you were angling to, I don't know, have more control over the world in the future? And yeah, he's born in Paris. He's Iranian, and it's possible that he's part of like this plan for a future. But I don't think he's Islamic, is he? I think he's forget the background. He's Persian, but that doesn't necessarily mean Islamic.
I know for sure. I know. I'm just wondering. Maybe he's. There's Christians there. I mean, there's Jews and Persian Jews. There could be a number of things. So.
And of course, that doesn't mean anything about what he is now, because that could just be what his family were. But I'm just saying, I don't know if he necessarily was raised Islamic at all.
A Buddhist follower of the Dalai Lama.
Dang, girl. With Bill Gates and Warren Buffett as signatory of the giving pledges, giving away his wealth. Yeah, he's one of those. So definitely that's scary because, you'll own nothing and be happy. But he does live on an island and have like servants dress him, basically.
So just to put it in the frame once again, and it doesn't even mean, of course, that he is anyhow involved. It's just his foundation, who knows who's controlling there and so on. But just that it's relatively low effort investment to create a political bomb that you can set up at any time when this particular party becomes threatening. And the real issue is that they only use 2 minutes because now they made like court proceedings for years and pretty much nothing stuck. And the real joke is that they were talking about buying this newspaper, but then actually the People's Party affiliates, they actually were buying the newspaper just a few months later. So the Freedom Party guys, they were like, drunk high school boys or something. Oh, we can do this, we could do that, and so on. But they couldn't really do anything. Others were doing it. And yeah, apparently you have an American affiliated foundation that funded the production of that video. It was released in a very edited fashion to ensure that the government would have to be reformed, that the Freedom Party wouldn't be able to be in government in 2020. That's at least one potential scenario. Yeah, so much for election meddling. You're muted, Andreas.
Oh, it was such an Americanism. It's like the South Park where Cartman's like taking over the college sports and not paying anybody. He's like, sure, you got something out of this. You learned a lesson. We taught you a lesson. That's what they're doing. You thought you could come up with this plan. Good. You thought you could actually do the plan? No, we get to do the plan. But I'm glad you thought it up for us. Brutal. Let's see. Also, okay, so Ibiza Fair, they're also making a show out of it. But we talked a bit about QAnon, and I'm kind of curious about QAnon because last time we talked, it was such a weird thing. We've had some years between it to think about it. I mean, what did you think was going on with QAnon at the time, and what do you think it was now?
You want me to come in on this?
Yeah,
one?
sure. Yeah, feel.
I mean, for me, I always was skeptical. I thought it was some kind of intelligence operation. I thought that the way this is the main reason why, is that it seemed to, you call it muddy the waters, right? Where you bring it, first of all, it was an amalgam of a lot of the so-called conspiracy discourse into something that became very popular very fast. And then it had these strange elements to it that to me seemed kind of asinine on its face, like JFK Jr. They still have this, like you see the picture of him. He's getting ready to come back. The other thing I was skeptical. So there's this whole idea, you can read like the CIA handbooks, where you go into the groups and then you fracture them with agents to try to break them apart. And that's what I felt like ultimately was the point of the operation. You distract, you fracture, and you prevent a larger movement from cohering around like a core idea of resistance. I thought, so there was that. I mean, the other thing is that it emerged at a time when it's a product of the internet technology of its day as well. What's the 4chan as it became popular, Facebook and Twitter, and just the way things can disperse fast in real time. It really was very good at that, capturing memes, dispersing memes. I think that something like the Podesta emails that are true, right? That's a WikiLeaks release. That when you have QAnon, it allows you to muddy the waters from any real examination of what those emails might have said and their implication, because you take it too far to these wild conclusions. What's the other one? The last thing I'll just say is like the idea of the storm is coming, right? That passive of construction, and then it's the future, right? Oh, it's coming. Don't worry. Just drink another Bud Light. Go to Target. Drink another Bud Light, and there's certain pacification, I think, of the intellect that also allowed for. So that was my instinct immediately, and I never saw anything to change. I mean, they've been wrong, right? Other than these kind of coded proofs that may or may not have been real. I mean, the storm didn't come, did it? I mean, I'm still waiting on the release of the thousands of indictments. I mean, that's been around for years. Where are the indictments?
If the storm came, then we lost the war, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. Like, because if there was a storm, then it was this all-out occupation and quarantine, and what do you call it? When everyone's the lockdowns. The lockdowns were kind of saying, hey, there's going to be real people fighting, so go home and wait it out. That's what they told people to do. So you're not on the streets seeing what's going on. So on one hand, yeah, it feels like a total false psychological operation. But then again, we have all these things that happen. Do you really think that this event 311 and that COVID don't kind of fit into a storm? Do you think that they're kind of storm-like?
Someone says cytokine storm.
What kind of storm? A
cytokine storm.
Cytokine, biological, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that let's say that they're at some level. Look, we know 311. All you have to look at is the Fauci statement. The next thing is about to come with the next president. And what's the event 201, right? Event 201. I mean, that was clearly at the higher levels. People knew that there was specifically a pandemic event. Okay. So if you are running a psychological,
what they planned for, like a pandemic. Yeah.
But if you're running a psychological operation to quell dissent and to fracture dissent, you would include knowing what was going to come. You would include elements of that to gain, credibility within people that are gullible enough. I like what someone said here: temporarily pacify these movements. Yes, but there was something else here that said, Q worked like a charm on the newbies. They became QBs. And that's how I see it. I mean, any real, and this is a great example. If you look at Alex Jones, go all the way back to like aughts Alex Jones. This is like my favorite example. And that's a whole separate topic, but just as an example of how you can kind of muddy waters. And he used to always be skeptical of both parties. That was a core of what he espoused. He would say that the war on terror was a construction that both parties participated in. And then when Trump came around, he sort of locked in with Trumpism for a while. And he kind of abandoned these core ideas of his skepticism. And that's how I see Q. It's like set aside critical thinking and sort of trust this thing. And I just think we got to be skeptical through and through. Never abandon skepticism. Never trust the plan. Make your own plan, in real time with questioning reality. So that's how I see it.
What about some of the stuff that happened? So I remember like Victor did amazing work tying together things and saying like, okay, so they said that they're going to be pushing out a bunch of CEOs. A lot of them are going to be allowed to die a year or two later, you know, so that it doesn't ruin the economy. Well, these were all part of the propagandas of the QAnon. And there were these interesting, like 150 CEOs departed in November, putting 2019 on track to record year for executive exit. So right before this. And so on one hand, you could tie it to QAnon. On another hand, you could also tie it to awareness of COVID coming, like some awareness of the real thing. I don't know. What do you think's there?
Well, I think that's just part of like any power structure, and the Fortune 500 can be a power. You can think of it as a power structure. The Fortune 100. I mean, Bilderberg. These networks of clubs of power, and you know, you want the old guard. Look, it's time for you to go, Jim. It's like a pitcher being relieved in the 7th inning, and you bring in your relief pitcher. Those guys weren't war consiglieres, so to speak. Those were just and you needed new people in that were maybe more hip to the plan or more effective at this phase of the plan. So I that's how I would see it, just more like that. Then I mean, I don't think those CEOs were killed. I mean, I haven't seen
a lot of CEOs just said they were going to go home and focus on their health, which I thought was interesting. And so it didn't sound like a QAnon thing too much. It sounded more like a awareness of COVID before it hit kind of thing. I don't know. I mean,
and it's
your health.
Yeah. No, I know. We're gonna go focus on health for a while. Yeah, before. Yeah. No, that's a strange one. I hadn't heard that. I didn't piece that.
I've heard. I was like at least a dozen different examples. The Expedia CEO. There's a female CEO from ABC or one of the was it ABC or NBC? There's a bunch of different characters that said for their health they were going to go focus on their family and their health. And so I was thinking, okay, well, because we hadn't heard of COVID yet, this does kind of sound like that thing, because they were saying, you know, QAnon's going to get them, and then they're going to make sure the economy doesn't hear about it, because if the economy heard about it, it would destroy the economy. Well, the economy was destroyed anyway. They heard about something that seems way worse, arguably. Like, I mean, the idea that there are some evil people in infrastructure is bad, but not as bad as that everyone will die if they don't, you know, submit to the infrastructure. So I don't know. It seems like we got the exact opposite of the QAnon storm from COVID. It was which is also why I wonder, like, was there a war that we didn't realize was going on?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think there's continuity of oligarchy power in America, and you know, the assassination of Kennedy maybe could pick a starting point. The Federal Reserve could be a starting point. Some people say assassination of Lincoln, or even the failure of Andrew Jackson. I mean, you can trace it back to where you want to trace it back to, but I mean, America's kind of captured, isn't it? I mean, it's been captured by this oligarchic transatlantic kind of Western power, and I think that they're playing psychological games. Like you'll see in the literature, people talking about Tavistock. I mean, these are experts at manipulating reality at the highest levels, writing scripts effectively. And that movie Wag the Dog we talked about earlier, that's a perfect film that shows how you're literally writing reality into existence. Or Edward Bernays, David Plate's favorite guy. I mean, there's whole teams of experts that their whole job is to control the mass consciousness. And this is public. I mean, shouldn't be controversial. So my view is it's more like that. You know, you might have like a period where you get these, you know, the red team wins, and you know, and then you bring back ultimately. And this is like the heart of the dangerousness, in my opinion. This is what's really dangerous. Pentagon and Wall Street, they're controlling things, and you can't. You know, as soon as you start exposing them, you know, like Julian Assange, or like hardcore going at them, that's when you're really under threat. That's kind of my sense here. And so I don't really see, like, it's just part of a continuity of crisis to usher in probably digital control technologies. I sent you that RFK tweet from a few days ago, this new technology that's in Ukraine. It's a Visa card that's embedded in real time with everything, where you get your government payments. Here it is. Yeah, the US AID sponsored Visa and Google assisted DIA app not only forces Ukrainians into a digital ID panopticon and encourages them to snitch on their fellow citizens. And so this is what I think it was about more than anything. I mean, we're going to be ushered into this tech age, and it's coming. And COVID was about this at some level, and the war is about this. It's all about this. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, it's my higher kind of synthesis.
Well, let's take that further, actually. So first off, talking about the NSA or the Octopus Network, like the idea of or even Hollywood. when the West German radio station was used on East Germany, right? So we're at a point where culture can affect people, but we're using something. So talking about astrology, a big thing with astrology might be EMF. A lot of these things are producing energy waves, and energy waves are affecting us. It might not be the only thing, but there's been some work that's tied EMF from stars astrology effects to cellular tower effects that we could be. I mean, this is also in concurrence with or in continuity with the idea of the Egyptians or the ancient Sumerians using ley lines for power, that we might be able to, beyond astrology, affect those same energies on Earth with technology. I mean, these weather making machines that we've talked about. Do you think, I mean, so someone asked earlier about Cat Hill. Are you familiar with Cat Hill, Ascension Island?
No, I'm not.
So Cat Hill is an interesting one. So basically, Ascension Island is this British American military base that the what's it called? The GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters, right? They've got a number of these outposts, and they produce signal. They've got a huge radio antenna, and it's grabbing and pushing signal. Do you think that any of these things could be kind of replacing astrology for modern witchcraft? That they're changing the energy waves and affecting people in order to, to encourage their hypnosis or magic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be, I wouldn't say replacing. I'm certain that they're probably working in conjunction with the astrology. There's a whole tradition in astrology called astrological magic that people should be aware of. Anybody out there should be aware of it. It's very popular in contemporary astrological circles. But the idea is that you align the moment and local space where you are with a certain set of parameters that allow energies of certain planets to be strong in a moment of real time. And then combined with that astrological alignment, you run rituals, kind of like those rituals when they opened the CERN bridge. Remember that? Or the CERN and then that bridge in Switzerland, there was two different ones where there's these elaborate ritualistic
the Godard tunnel.
Yeah, very likely when you combine that type of ritualism with an astrological alignment, you can actually do massively powerful things. I mean, and it goes all the way back and, is the Islamic astrological tradition. That's the other thing about Islam. They were the custodians of astrological knowledge from the ancient world. Islam was highly advanced with their intellectual, as you alluded to earlier. This is where a lot of the Greek texts and the Hellenistic texts had a repository with these Islamic libraries. They were translated into Latin, into Arabic. And so these Islamic astrologers developed really high-end tools, probably influenced by, even the Hellenistic magical tradition, the kind of pagan European magical traditions. But so my answer to you is that I'm certain they're not certain is too strong a word, but very likely constructing and building like whole temples that they might use for a ritual 30 years and out in the future, that they know there will be an opening at that time, given a certain astrological alignment. And it's like some people believe the Twin Towers were built to be destroyed for that ritual that happened with that Zohar prediction that David Plate talks about so often, that it's actually like a multi-decade or multi-generational ritual with this knowledge of how, what will be emerging. So that's one way to look at this stuff. I don't know if their beams can change the sky above. I mean, I'm kind of skeptical of that. I feel like certain things may be programmed into the matrix, let's say. And there's no way. I
remember those Sprite commercials, or was it 7-Up or something? Like they're going to laser the moon and then they accidentally destroy the moon. They move it. And I think we might destroy more than we can. I liked what you said about harnessing. Like if we're able to harness, great. But I'm so concerned that we're going to mess with the system in a way we don't predict, and it'll destroy a lot.
Well, that movie, this is my fear, just to kind of bring it back to like something maybe so-called tangible or in the mainstream. There's a fucking war right now, and it's leading to maybe World War III. I mean, this is not insane. We're getting closer and closer to these scenarios. And this movie that's coming out this summer, Oppenheimer, is about this exact thing. There's a scene in the trailer where he's like, so you're telling me if I push this button, we might destroy the whole world? And the Oppenheimer, the Tommy Shelby character, I forgot the actor's name, but Cillian Murphy, or however you say it, he's like, it's a non-zero risk that we may destroy the whole planet. And, what happens, this is what I'm mostly concerned about in real time over the next 7 to 10 years, based on astrological cycles, by the way, is this global conflagration. And what will the world look like after it? How many are going to be purged? Will it happen or not? I pray that it doesn't. I pray to God it doesn't. But, this is the kind of symbolic, soup that we're swimming in.
We talked a lot about Y2K 20 years ago, and I don't think kids today have any idea really what that meant. I mean, Y2K felt, because it was before September 11th, it felt like September 11th, didn't it? People were freaked out. They're like, the world's going to end. I was in Silicon Valley, so maybe it was more biased, but we were stressed about Y2K, and no kids worried about that anymore. They laugh at the idea that, their phone gets deleted. They just log back in and get all their photos on Google. So it's the cloud and everything has made people think that there's no risk. And we're about, what was the new, the technological reset event planning. So they just recently did kind of an event, 301 kind of thing, 201 with technology.
What's the thing that was popular the last couple of years? The Klaus Schwab, the cyber pandemic. Is it this kind of planning?
Digital COVID. If I type that, will that be enough? Because there's a digital COVID equivalent.
You got to go to Twitter, man. That's where it all is now. Everything sucks as a search engine. It's so bad. I can't believe how bad the search engines have become. If you type in cyber pandemic or digital COVID, you'll get it there. Pandemic. And you get something like digital ID, Klaus Schwab warning the next pandemic, or cyber attack so vast it disconnects the internet. That seems like an older video. I know Schwab spoke recently. Maybe this is from one of his more recent speeches. Here's another Twitter account.
We Forum, there we go. Protecting. So the thing is, we're looking on Forum itself is saying, look, there definitely will be a cyber pandemic. It's inevitable, I think is the word they use, for a cyber pandemic. It'll be as bad as COVID, but worse because it'll be digital. So we'll be able to make it as bad as we want. And it'll be for computers and all, not just computers, but all data. And this is, they're planning it for 2024. Simultaneously, you've seen Taiwan chips gone, right? We're about to get to a point where if America and Russia and China can't get the same chips, then we're going to start making our own chips. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, we'll have to, right?
But they're going to be different kinds of chips. So this is the end of the cappuccino economy this year. This is the end of everyone having a computer that can read another computer, right? It might be a few militaries that can read each other's stuff, but we're going to start to become more and more isolated. And that's best case scenario. It could be worse. It could be that there's just no chips for most people. You have to go to a library to access a computer, right? Because that'll be fine. Because they'll have a server. You'll be able to get to the terminal like in the 60s. Do you think this is all coming, like this reset?
No, I think it's possible. It's one scenario. I think it's good to think about multiple scenarios, and we don't know. I honestly don't know. But my sense is that it's going to become more omnipresent rather than less, because of the power of the technology. This is like the great mind of the digitized, global brain. And the more it's connected, the more you can extract resources. For one, it's more extractive of wealth, which seems to be the goal of whatever the people in this hierarchy. It's Saturn in astrological symbolism. But I think if the tech becomes less integrated, you'll have more freedom around the world. You'll have a lot of people that can't be controlled. They'll be farming. I just saw a story, and I've been to Belarus. There's farms everywhere. Everybody's got a farm. And in Russia, I think this was the story I saw. It's like more of the food supply is local household growth of vegetables and raising chickens than agribusiness. And so you begin to have like a freedom that would flourish. The tech needs to be instilled and omnipresent for the so-called control structure to operate effectively. There's that side of it. I think the other side is that I kind of tend to also, I'm open, but there is the idea that there is a kind of mystic spiritual energy that the tech allows for. Like, for example, even this conversation, we're ensouled human beings, but we're speaking to each other thousands of miles across the globe. And there can be, a growth of spiritual connectivity in a certain sense. Like maybe it's all leading to some kind of combination. It's not like a transhuman nightmare, but rather it's this kind of more productive and creative, interconnective kind of apotheosis for the collective in a certain way. I try to stay open to those ideas too, man. I'm not, it's like Luddism. Sure, we got to be skeptical, but what if this is going to unleash some kind of creativity at a mass scale, like it has already? Look at this conversation, man. Look at you. You're where you are. You're where you are. I'm where I am. It's like real time. This is magical, man. Have you seen that new Google thing where it's a real time 3D that we'll eventually be able to sit around a table and it's like we're in the same space 3D.
I haven't seen the Google one, but I've seen Meta's. Which one do you mean?
Put this up. Are you able to do this? Were you doing that, Raf? Go to Twitter and type in Google 3D talk or Google 4D
they have
or
a
3D
full
talk.
3D map of the whole world now. Like you can go anywhere.
But there's it's like you get the 3D.
Germans
Here it is. Here it is. Go right here and put this on. That's the Google's magic window. It's the magic window, and that is what
here.
There, I think. Yes, there it is. There it is. And that's that image. So you have this setup where you have a special screen, but they're saying it's so lifelike. Like you're able to touch through the screen. They were fist bumping each other. I think people underestimate the transformation biotech and AI and
I see all this coming, but
happen. Yeah.
I see this coming, but I think it's going to be like okay, so there was a reason why they wanted people to have it, and it might have. There's two ways. One is that they thought the more information technology people have, the more powerful their slaves would be, and then they'd own the slaves, and it's great. The other way is that by producing so much stuff and getting people to buy it, then they were able to advance the fabrication processes, and now they're at a point where it can be ubiquitous. And if it's ubiquitous, it doesn't need to be in anyone's hands. All you need is to be part of the lodge that knows the magic words to activate Siri. And then there's a specific cast of people that can talk to technology because it's everywhere, but it only listens to that cast of people. And then everyone else is they think that they're wizards, right? Because they're a group of people that have the ability to talk to each other all around the world. And then if you want to do that, you could go to a temple, because there could be a Google temple everywhere. And then you could go into the temple and there's a wall, and the wall's on the other side of the temple in the other part of the world. And so it could become a very religious experience to visit Google. You start to worship the attributes that the corporation's giving you. I mean, that again, I went to the worst possible place. But where do you think that Klaus Schwab, what do they really want? Do they want, there's this reset coming. It's not just economic, it's psychic. Let's imagine a positive solution. What do they try? What is the reset supposed to do? What do they want?
Before you answer, may I insert one thing to your thought, Andreas? So, of course, or SJ, I mean, super nice technology. We're just using exactly that right here. Although I have to say, I would very much prefer, at least in parallel to that, number one, get back the black scrying mirrors or whatever they show on 18th, 17th century things, ghosts coming out of some electrical something and displaying potentially television, or however you would call it, or teleconferencing. I want that technology, and I want the airships, super effective, fast. I want the underground railroads, probably already built, many times proven, many times unknown.
Just let me use it, right?
Because then the thing is, I'd be in New York from Austria or in California in 4 hours anyhow, or if even that much. So I'd prefer having the freedom to use that, potentially even with advanced energy tech, that it wouldn't be an issue at all, rather than needing to use it. Because what do we want? We want to connect with other people. We want to be in their, however you want to call it, auric field. We want to converse with them. And if that could be made fast, cheap, and easy, I prefer that to having the most advanced augmented reality thing. Just to mention that this also exists, and we should totally also get that if we get the other thing.
Yeah, and this is my belief of what's coming. It's based on, Pluto and Aquarius, first of all, started this year. And it was right in March, right as the AI was released through ChatGPT.
Wow.
And Dream Studio. And I mean, they came out a little earlier, but by that March, in March, all the energy changed astrologically. Saturn left Aquarius. It had been there since the beginning of when COVID began, March 2020. So that cycle was over. It's now in a very creative sign, Pisces, which is like expanding the creativity of the new tech that Saturn and Aquarius brought. Sorry, just to cut right to it, the idea is that I think this period over the next 40 years before Kurzweil, by the way, did you see he moved up his singularity date? He was saying 2043. Now it's like 2029. Yeah, it's wild. But Pluto will be in Aquarius until the early 2040s. But I think what it does, it's just what Rafael said. It's like you turn up the contrast on an image and you really can see the human and the digital. And this is the thing I believe, you go back to the Gnostic texts and they say, I think there's something true there. We have the divine spark. It's right here. Everybody's got it. Dylan calls it there's in that album that came out. Did you guys see that, by the way? That album that came out right when COVID hit, Dylan's album, and he had the cover of the shot.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And that's an amazing record, by the way. And the JFK song was released on that record. But the idea is that they can't replicate it. See, this is why we have the ace in the hole, I believe. They need us. They need our soul, our soul. And so we're always going to be as powerful as we want to allow ourselves to be. And all you do is have to turn it off and go into the woods and meditate. That's always better, in my view, at the highest levels in terms of the magic and the power and everything. And so I think that's the great task.
Right? That one?
Yeah, Rough and Rowdy Ways. And like the song that I'm talking about, some of my favorite. So False Prophet, if you type in False Prophet, you'll see the original image for the single that then they changed like a few months later as the vaccine debates emerged. So there it is. You can see this was the False Prophet.
Wow.
And you can see he's got the shot. And Dylan, it was like dropping truth bombs all over this record, man. I mean, it's like the most awaken a truth record that I've seen. He released an album on 9/11 2001 too. Both Dylan and Jay-Z had releases on the day of 9/11, the morning of 9/11. So there's something major about Dylan and either his prophetic abilities or just that he's kind of allowed to disclose being part of the complex, of truth knowers in the system. This is an amazing record too. But, my belief is that I agree with you, Rafael. I mean, I think the goal is to be able to turn it off. That's my red line. As long as I can shut it all down and go into the woods for a weekend and then come back, then I'm cool. I want to capture the upside. It's the injectables, the brain implants, the ability to never turn the stuff off that I think is where I'm still not want to avoid. And maybe I'm wrong.
Are you concerned that, obviously we could be really benefited if this technology was really well made by really well-meaning people and they didn't screw up in their intentions as the road to hell is paved with good intention. Like there's a lot of if statements to make this work is the problem. And it's kind of Oppenheimer, but it's a lot more of a risk of destroying the world. And even as a person who loves transhumanism and technology, I hear Raph because the less I rely on myself, the more I rely on this technology, the less I have the capacity to rely on myself in the future. Like if I don't memorize phone numbers now, I never will. If I don't learn to do that skill, I'll never learn that skill again. And I think humans we've already lost a lot of the empathetic, intuitive. This is even making kids wear masks for the first years of kindergarten for this generation. It feels like it's part of the psychic empathy and awareness in all of our citizens. I don't know. I try not to be that cynical, but what do you think is going on other than that?
I think they've already lost, man. I'm a kind of a hardcore optimism at my core. I mean, we're magic. We have the precious human in birth. That's what the Buddhists call it. We've been incarnated as humans. It's the most precious thing in the Buddhist cosmology. All the gods want this. And so we've already won. I mean, I don't think that they can't take it away. It's too powerful and too precious. And there's no way to stop it. It's like I saw Alex Jones on Twitter. These videos get posted on Twitter occasionally, even though he's not on. He's banned still. But and that was the Elon Musk free speech platform. He was still banned. But I should stay away from topics like that, by the way.
No, you're good. You can talk about whatever you want. I don't mind. Okay. I love Alex Jones. I side hug the boy all the time. We're all right.
Okay. But he was saying it's like, what did he say? It's the idea that we already won somehow. That with good lies dormant and it just waits because people are good. Most people are kind and loving. They don't want to deal with this stuff. You want to love your family and enjoy life. But when the eighth inning comes, that's when good will emerge and it always wins. It's a tale as old as time. That's my sense here, is that these are like archetypal forces of the ongoing, never ceasing battle between good and evil. It's part of the makeup of this reality. That's what the Buddhists say. It's good and evil. And we are the modulating force, humans that have the divine spark. And we get to basically feed good and allow that to manifest. And I just don't think that will ever fail. It's like a magic bullet. Now, some people will be, victims of the war. Some people won't, and you and I mean, we may give up at some point, but I think the goal is to keep the soul alive as long as possible and centered in everything we do. And they're going to try to do their machinations. They always have, but humans always win. The indelible human spirit, my favorite phrase. We're going to win. We already did. We already won. That's my view, man. It's an optimistic view. I know. I tend to juxtapose that view with like something like the Matrix, where we end up in just pods. But even in the Matrix, it wins, right? He wakes up, and then there's this war, and the so-called good guys win. Anyhow, that's my take on it. I mean, I'm optimistic. Think about the love in your life just today. I mean, you've got people around you that probably love you. You've got cool stuff out there, food, you can sing, you can make art, you can do all of that. And that's here with us now. I mean, that's not, you can do all that now today. Like the highest form of being a human being is available, so until that's not an option, like, I don't know. Right, we're winning or we won.
We talk a lot about the hypotheticals of losing our humanity, but it's hard to say, like, what are the qualities that we're losing, or how can we save our humanity, because we are losing nature, or our idea of nature. We're being kept from it a lot of the time. And you're talking about people that are in farms and are able to live in nature, and that's sustaining it. So there's definitely a group of people that still are sold. But do you think we're going to lose do you think that some humans are going to lose their souls in the transhumanist, or is soul just inherent?
I think it's regenerative. That's my sense. But I think some people may, damage themselves, and they'll have to live with those consequences. But, I think there's a regenerative quality. I mean, I'm not even, just for full disclosure, I'm not a adherent to the Christian faith in terms of like active practitioner or anything. I really like it as a metaphor. I think there's a lot of value to it. And even the Gnostic texts, which are arguably Christian, these are beautiful metaphors. So I just want to be clear when I say this, because people might think he sounds like, am I like proselytizing Christianity? And I'm not. But what was I going to say? You asked me, do you think people, and it's regenerative, this idea of repenting, and I think people, when you turn to the light in any moment of consciousness, it's like the Buddhist meditation, you just turn your mind back to the attention of the present moment. It's always there. As long as awareness and consciousness is present, you can deploy it to put that attention on the soul or on the enlivened spirit that, exists. Now, maybe they have some kind of injectable, what was that video that went around the last few years? Like, this will remove the spirit part. But I'm still skeptical of that. I mean, they can't even remove a common fucking cold, man. Do
you think that animals have souls and spirit and all that?
Yeah, I tend to think so. I tend to think they do. Yes. I mean, you can see it in the eyes, like of your dog. I mean,
Raph, do you agree?
Of course, everything is consciousness, but with those, they are also individualized, obviously, yes. Mm-hmm.
Some people get all weird. They're like, no, animals can't have souls. I remember in church sometime, they're like, your dog can't go to heaven. And I was like, I'm not coming back. This is ridiculous. Like, what are you talking about?
I'm taking my dog with me.
Yeah. But there's this thing with Bigfoot and hominids, and think with the Epic of Gilgamesh, the idea of being more God than man, or more man than God, more wild, and I wonder, do you think that Bigfoot has a soul? Do you think that the ancient hominids have the kind of consciousness or soul that, maybe not the same intelligence, but do you think that they had consciousness and soul? I mean, do we get our souls from our ancestors?
It's a tough one. I mean, I don't know. There's the question of what were human beings derived from. Were the archons and that whole, let's just go with that metaphor, but whatever it was, were we modified by a substrate that already was extant here, that was similar to us, but that wasn't ensouled in the same way we are? That's the question. And I mean, can they sing? Can they write poetry? Can they, and maybe if they can't, there's a case that there's some kind of tiered levels, but they say dolphins can speak and sing, and like that one committed suicide from John Lilly's. I was just reading about that recently. So I would be open to there being levels of this at some way.
Is intelligence different than consciousness? Maybe intelligence isn't the same.
Exactly, or even if there are levels, like certain skills of intelligence, that doesn't make someone better or worse. Like the consciousness is still the core of the power or something like this. These are kind of unanswerable questions, I think, but I'm open to all of it. I mean, that looks like us.
Yeah, and the speculation, would you say you think it's likely we just kind of elevated ourselves to this point, or that we've been manipulated by some Nephilim or some kind of, what did you say earlier?
Archonic.
Archonic.
Nephilim, yeah.
Yeah, something archonic. Do you think that we're a cross between something archonic and something primal?
That's my sense, if I was guessing.
Yeah?
Or that if it's an AI, I mean, these physicists now are saying it's a digital projection or a hologram. That's kind of some of our best thinkers are coming around to that idea. We may be existing outside of this video game interface, that there's actually a whole another reality, like a Philip K. Dick idea, or the world and its double. What was the German filmmaker that made those movies in the 70s, the 40 films, the actor from
Kieslowski?
No, the half German, half British, the guy that was in the Tarantino film about Nazis, who played the German soldier
from Das Boot. The Das Boot guy?
He plays the double agent who does Dreiglassen, and then they know who he is. That actor, someone will say it up here, but his name, there's a German director that has the same name as that actor, very famous, and he's got a film about this sci-fi world where it's basically levels. They wake up in this, but then there's some other level higher. It's called World on a Wire. And I think that would be just as plausible too. It's like if you just, and all of a sudden you wake up and there it is, the video game's over, and then you come back in. World on a Wire. There's Rainer Fassbinder. Yeah, Werner Fassbinder.
Great. Yeah, I'll have to check this out.
Yeah.
Say it again. Sorry.
So yeah, new computer that hosts a simulation program. I mean, this is just as plausible to me as anything. And so what are we then if we're placed in the simulation? What is this kind of kernel of divine spark? That might mean something completely different that we just don't even have a capacity to process. But I still think something like that's happening here. Yes.
Sticky Mark says, hello. How's my fave rave? The son I never wanted. Sticky Marks, we love you for £5. Pissed. The answer's great. FYI, I wanted daughters. For my sins, I got 2. Ooh. Love from Yorkshire. Nice. I wonder about the idea of the spirit in man or spirit in humanity, like because the archonic aspect makes me wonder: does the soul come from the generative quality, like kind of a Aristotelian? You build yourself up, or is it somehow it's put into man? And these are very different ideas. One is the religious, it's endowed from the archon. The other is that we're building it, we're making our own meaning. I think it changes everything. That might be the difference between the people who run the world and the people who are trying to make it through this. Do you think? Or
yeah, it's tough. I mean, my a lot of this is just intuitive because
that's good. I'm all for intuition.
Yeah. But I think that whether there's choice or we take an assignment, kind of like Mission Impossible, if you choose to accept it, you can come down here. If you go with Buddhist cosmology, this is part of a journey of becoming an arhat and then not being reborn in the Matrix, kind of like the Matrix 2 and 3. There's this idea of, will Keanu Reeves emerge again? Or even the new Matrix, by the way. I love that one.
Yeah. I think it's underrated.
It's very underrated. But so I think this might be, we've chosen to be here. We know it's part of a training or part of just our journey for some higher purpose. I mean, you're really getting at, what is oneness? I tend to like the Islamic idea of the oneness of all things that you find in Platonism, Pythagoreanism. I mean, is there this kind of great oneness? Is there something outside of that? What is it? What is reality?
Can you maybe I don't even know. Can you explain this a bit in Islamic terms? Because just as you mentioned, in terms of Europe being dominated, and then the whole question that David Ewing Jr. likes to bring up with Greek history and so on, and the way you just put it really almost sounds like this is Islamic core theology, and then just got translated into our Greek ancient, and now this is where we have it from. Can you maybe talk about this more, this unity concept in Islam?
Yes, and who I would look up is a thinker named Ibn. What is his name? I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry to be dropping f-bombs.
It's okay. We talked about a lot of worse things, I think.
Okay. I'm more relaxed here, and I didn't really realize. I realized we're on a YouTube live stream, and that can be a problem with that.
For all the 8 to 11-year-old Mormon kids who are watching the show, we apologize, and we hope that you can just skip that part of the show. Yeah.
So it's
Dow, Lurv, and Peas. Thank you, Sticky Marks. We love
So it's Ibn Arabi. That's who
Ibn
Ibn al-Arabi is who we're talking about. Sufi metaphysics is the stream that you want to tap into, and the unity of being is the name, or wujud, meaning existence or presence. And it's this very metaphysical notion that, to me, this is like a transformative. The current Salafists don't like this guy. Okay, they think he was a heretic because he concluded that effectively we're all one, and there's no way to actually be outside of the oneness. So it was a proof that all religions are valid, and so they don't like him. They don't like this guy.
I noticed in Peru it's a lot more acceptable. There's a lot of Sufi in Peru because I guess they were secretly there. They're trying to get away from the Spanish Inquisition, so there's a huge Sufi community in Peru.
Yeah, and I mean, there's this. So this is kind of what I like, is this idea that there's a unity of the existence. So if there's nothing outside of the unity, maybe what if it's just we're here to have fun? Isn't that kind of a shift? I mean, look, I study the paranoid high strange as much as
I've had more people get more upset when a guest brings that up than anything else. And I'm not picking on you. I just was thinking it's funny because I had a friend who Ben Goertzel's sons are Zarathustra Goertzel. Ben Goertzel is one of the more important AI programmers in the world. And his son is, no slouch himself, doing AI ethics and everything and metaphysics. And he talked a lot about this idea of pleasure maximalism, but what is pleasure itself? And we get so confused on that because we have these really interesting ideas of gluttony, which is beyond pleasure. So we have to understand that there's things that, you think of that would bring you pleasure, but the noble Tao is not the eternal Tao. So you can't just eat ice cream all day and just keep using heroin. Like, it's not how it works, right?
No. It's the art of pleasure, the art of love, and you're not talking about pure eros, there's a whole mixture of
even the word hedonism sounds so wrong, but hedonism isn't what people think it is, right? Because hedonism could be mutually hedonistic, and the idea of trying to give people the opportunity to have as many existential experiences so they can make the best choices they can, so that those choices could be taught to other people, the reflection. I mean, hedonism isn't what we were taught. It kind of freaks me out. As a Catholic, I was supposed to be into suffering,
I'm Catholic too, so I'm not active, but I was certainly raised in that. And
you're not suffering right now. Nice, very good.
Suffering. I mean, this is decaying, bro. This is decaying. The suffering every day. I got to eat. I've got to, do bodily, all of that stuff. It's like built in.
Okay, well, then let's wrestle with that for a second, because, we've been really ethereal and optimistic, but I think the thing that really challenges that is materialism. Like the fact that our bodies are falling apart, that we're losing memories, that our parents can't remember things, that they're going to die, that we're going to die. I mean, all that, the material, is that the root of our, that we think everything's evil, that the people are, the cynical, pessimistic stuff, is that, what is it? Just go. Talk.
Yeah, that's a fast. Like, we're all inevitably going to die, so we project this kind of evil because we're trying to cope with that. When in reality, what if that's just as pleasurable and powerful of a new beginning as birth? And that's what some cultures believed in. The whole cultural, impetus was about preparation for death.
Right.
Tibetan Book of the Dead, Egyptian Book of the Dead. And I've been around that death. I've seen people dying in hospice, family members, and there's nothing like it. It's the most tripped out thing, man. When first of all, you never know when they're going to die.
Right.
Second of all, it's like the synchronicities emerge, and all of a sudden, all the families there, like singing Ave Maria. This was in my Catholic, and then the soul leaves. You can see it leave. And so I think that death should be, prepared for. And it should enliven the present. I mean, what do we do? Like, you're creating, Xirtus. This is an amazing thing. You're giving this to reality. You're providing and offering as regularly as you're streaming. You're creating things with your time. You're generative. And the fact of death should reinforce, excite, and propel that generativity is my view of it. And then we should celebrate it when we meet death. I mean, what if it's like an amazing adventure and we get to, see whatever's on the other side, and they're waiting for us, like some of these new age people like Dolores Cannon. They're like, you'll be waiting for the man to deprogram and kind of review what happened. And I mean, that is possible at some level. So I don't think we should be afraid of death. It's inevitable. And we should kind of celebrate it and use it to motivate us, day to day. That's my sense of it. But yeah, I think there is some without. It's hard, first of all, because this is like the core of the core issue that you will not exist as such at some point.
That's kind of, I think earlier you brought up optimism, basically saying you were but you're only optimistic in a realistic sense. You're saying, well, realistically, the spirit will keep going. Even after I exhale, the breath will be in something else. But you're admitting, like, we could not make it. Like, you and me could give up, quit. We could die. Anything could happen to us along the way because we're the individual. We're just one little bit of the thing, right? The optimism is for the collective.
Yeah, I mean, we could just decide it's too hard to. What if the next thing, right? The next event, whatever that's going to be, and it's just too hard. Like, will you quit?
Can I ask a question?
Will you go to the streets and beg rather than capitulate with whatever you're supposed to do? It takes courage, man. I admire those people that, a lot of people like lost everything. I was reading a guy in Lithuania when the height of the lockdowns, and he was on Twitter. He's like, listen, he wrote a thread. I've lost my job. I can't work. They won't let me work. I can't buy food anywhere except these little corner stores where there is.
I was so excited. I was like, this is going to liberate so many people. I'm so naive. I'm the most naive person you've ever met. I'm like, wow, now that there's no reason, they're going to do the right thing. Like, every single time they get me that way.
But he was willing to go all the way. And I mean, that's the thing. There are people, I'm from Austin. I mean, there's so many AR-15s and these people will just die. They'll say, come and take it. I mean, that exists as a core belief. So some people will do that route. But I do think that it's unknown. I mean, I know today I'm trying. It's a daily thing. Someone in the comments said we have to do it every day. And it's just kind of, I hope I can keep centering this as long as I'm able to and have courage and
it's create. Rough. I mean, the idea also of buying Wonder Bread or, just processed foods, like, because you can't get access to real food because you're not farming or someone's not doing the little thing. So it just feels like a lot of people, if it's not the whole collective, at least a lot of people are sick. A lot of people have been intoxicated with this alternative to making good choices. It's a system that supports them so that they don't have to make good choices. It just comes in and it does exactly enough to keep them alive. And then as long as they keep making bad choices, it'll take care of them. And I feel like enough people are getting addicted to that. And every time I think it's going to break, they come up with a new horrible system to replace it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is what Bernays said. You go read that introduction to Propaganda, and he's like, the first paragraph right out of the gate, he's like, the human masses are wild animals that can go out of control, and a small group, has to control this wild force. And I think it's like a sheep. Once they're herded, they want to be herded. I mean, they want to be controlled. And I think that's as much of what's happening here as anything else. And you just hope that within that dance, there are people still willing to, seek, be truth tellers, explore the nature of reality, fight back for their maneuverability to do that, even within a control structure. I mean, the reality is, this is what I tell people a lot. The body we go back to the physical body. We're controlled. This is controlling us more than like the hierarchy of the them or the Council of 13 or whoever. I mean, this is the conspiracy more as much as anything, that we have a body that if we don't get food in 3 days, we're going to go we'll kill for food, probably. I mean, maybe. I mean, okay.
No, we won't actually. No. I know we won't, because everyone can at least food fast for weeks, and the only thing that happens is you get healthy. But of course, if people would be riled up, or if you don't know what crazy EMFs are being sent,
kill each other.
Yeah. Exactly. Then that's another thing. But generally speaking, we are more resilient, I think, than most people believe. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's an extreme example. I just mean that there's a primal thing with it. We'll fight for survival. Let's just put it that way. It's built in. We're going to fight for life. It's part of our programming. And
Intact here. I worked for 20 years a day, and 20 years, and I stole. So I'm good. But what about 4 billion people living on $1 a day? Look at Caracas. I mean, there are people that are their choices are limited on purpose by the infrastructure, so they have to do what they're told.
Yeah, and I think even like those, I haven't been to Caracas, so I don't know, but there's a simpler life. I mean, I know people here that live really cheap.
Yeah,
And
it's
they're
true. It's
cooking
actually
every
kind of nice
meal.
in Caracas, except for the infrastructure. Like you don't want to, you get like power and internet for an hour a day, but otherwise you're friggin'. There's a lot of nature. There's a lot of really, the food grows there. So this is the thing like you mentioned earlier about the Soviet Union and the small gardens program. What is the remnants of that? Well, they're the least controlled by monocropping. Russia's the least controlled by monocropping. The rest of the world is stuck. And whatever happened in America has now been forced to Argentina and to Chile. And so we could talk about Venezuela, but it'd probably be worth mentioning what Monsanto's doing to Chile and Argentina because it's not much better, right?
Yeah, I mean, they want to control the food production because you're free. As long as you have food, you're free. These guys are saying that's a lie. Listen, I'm not trying to lie. It's a metaphor of like when you don't eat long enough, you're going to fight to nourish yourself. Yes, you can fast for a long, long time with water.
Can I actually reframe this in a different way? Because I think that's the point, that generally through food, pollution, bad information, destruction of society and economy, education, people are being kept constantly in a low energy state, fear-based states. And in low energy state, people are erratic, people don't have long-term thinking, it's harder for them to properly engage in empathy, all of those things. And I think, if anything, that could be the grand conspiracy, that all of the things that are being done to keep people in a low energy state. And even though it may sound somewhat esoteric, but it is measurable. The cell doesn't have the proper voltage because of all the toxins and so on. And that is what makes people more easily fearful, because they can't even properly synthesize the neurotransmitters in their gut and all of that. And then it's easier, you put some EMF on them, you put them in front of some screens, you give them the right triggers, which you implanted through traumatizing them from birth. And then they're easy to control. But the thing they don't want is through information, food, cleanliness, in that sense, that people have high energy states, because then even if you see it as a signal, whatever outside disruptive signal comes in, it's much more easily deflected, or it's just not even received. And here we also get into the whole, how did you call it so nicely, SJ, inoculations or something thing, with certain fragments that may resonate more to certain frequencies and all of that. So this all relates.
Also, you sent. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just quickly said, just to go back to the RFK tweet about that chip that's coming in, that digital. I mean, there's certainly a move to that. And I think a lot of it is about control, because the more you control, the more you can profit, the more you keep your catbird seat in the hierarchy of the society.
Brutal, yeah. So there was a link you sent me. Let me see if I can find where I put that. Hold on. This is Achinta Beta Abeda. What's this? School of Vedanta.
I just mentioned this because it reminded me of this Islam unitary concept. It's
also never go full Vedanta.
The inconceivable, the simultaneous inconceivable oneness and difference of God and God's energy, or of creator and creation. And this would simply mean that we are simultaneously individualized and the one thing. And it would also go along with the idea, and this is even in the Hebrew thing with the Ein Sof, that in the beginning there is just one. And if everything is happening within the one, that in that ultimate sense, nothing can really be lost. Maybe something can be gained by, simulating games within itself. But if anything, this would be the simulation, I would say, we're all part of. And this unity is what's on the other side, which is why it's so inconceivable or hard to grasp. But also, because you asked earlier, I really don't think anyone can lose their soul or anything, especially if we consider that the only time we can experience is now. So just logically speaking, if we exist now, we must always exist.
I'm more concerned with AI getting a soul than humans losing a soul. I'm not like worried about it, but I'm pretty sure that's more likely.
But if it gets a human soul, then it's fine.
Yeah, but again, with the whole idea, like, is it a soul a human soul, or is it just a human's body using a soul? And so, that soul might not be able to process the same thoughts in a different body. Like there's a spirit versus material, and the material might be where the thoughts are coming from. And then, so you get hit by a bus and you forget everything, but you're still your soul, right? Like that didn't change anything, but your soul grew because of all those experiences, but you just don't remember them. That's kind of like AI.
It reminds me of the movie The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Did you guys see that one with where it's the publisher of the fashion magazine gets in locked in syndrome. I think this is the film about locked in syndrome. Yeah. And he writes, he basically has spiritual wisdom that comes from his ability to only blink the eye. And he writes the bestseller about the wisdom he gained from being, locked in. And that might have been at some level, the purpose of his life was preparing him to transmit the wisdom that was only gleaned through what we think of as tremendous, suffering. But it was productive of truth and wisdom, so it's strange, isn't it? All the paradoxes and contradictions in the reality. And I like this kind of idea, Xirtus. Is that an okay name? Can I just say that? Or okay, sure. I didn't. But you've got this kind of looking at it at all sides is a kind of ethos here, because that's what we have to do. And you got to question it all, think about the counter arguments, think about the other sides of everything, and that's the only way through, in my view. Anti-dogmatism.
Do you think that if humans were to wipe themselves out, like you talked about Oppenheimer, if there was something like that to happen, the soul, is it trapped then outside of the body, or can souls get into like dolphins, and would consciousness continue on and find another way?
There may be other places of incarnation, other games. Let's just go with that, back to that levels, metaphor. Other levels, other interfaces, other consoles, and we just plug and play and we go there. I mean, some people are talking now about that many people have incarnated. If you look at the human population just in the 20th century to now, I mean, it's a massive growth of huge a number of souls, if everyone has one, have come here. And some people are postulating it's to witness this event that we're kind of living through now, whatever that is, whether it's sentient AI coming online, whether it's World War III and we just go out in a blaze, something like Fight Club, that final scene, and they just watch it all get destroyed, and it's this kind of cathartic spiritual release. Even if it's just the access to the knowledge and the creative abilities think about what you can do with these AI tools now. You can just type in what you want, it gives you the code, it gives you the images. I mean, what about 6 months, 6 years, 60 years from now? How creative. And what
years again? 2023? Yeah, 6 years from now. I can't wait. Yeah. That's going to be the big crystal
2030, thing. Right? It's
going to be wild.
Deep into the second Trump administration. No, I'm just kidding.
From you, that's even funnier, I think. Well, okay, but if the soul can the soul be multiplied then? I mean, so I've thought about maybe there's just a bunch of microbes and they all have souls, and so now we're just like, once you drink a kombucha and then you got a billion more people, it's fine, because there's already. Is it not that it's human soul, and does soul grow the same way material seems to? I mean, material doesn't. It changes, right? So
it's a great question. I mean, they say if you go back to the Gnostic origin story, it was a oneness state, and then Sophia's error that creates the split. And so, I mean, my sense is that the original oneness state would be infinite. Maybe there's an infinity or enough there to power as many shards that need to be, embedded into materiality. The other idea would be dividing. You get close enough to a wall, you keep dividing by 2, it's an infinity of division. So there's an infinity of shards that exist just from that mathematical equation. So that would be my sense. I mean, there's the other thing you see people say, this was my twin flame. And I don't really mean this in the kind of like, I'm your YouTube tarot reader or something, but that there may be like a soul group, or there's, you've met people, you just turn and wow, this energy is that they become important for a period of time. And it just seems like there may be a shared history. There's past life studies that there's science behind that seems to confirm, some kind of reincarnation, re-embedded.
I always wonder also about the like the opposite issue. Like, so let's say your families have had a war, or I don't know, like something weird happened where there's unfinished business, and so the families manifest people to fall in love generations later just to fill the void. I feel like I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Manichaeism? Manny?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's not something I know a ton about, but I know about.
Ironically, what you were saying is exactly what. Like, so the Sophia of Christ the Gnostic Sophia of Christ comes from Manichaeism, and Saint Augustus was originally a Manichaean, and they're kind of more pantheists. So the deal of singularity, but also that God is so big, like it's not that God and the devil are equal necessarily, but it's sort of that there's been this error of Sophia, this split, and the light and the darkness dynamic have swallowed them. So the light was forced itself to be swallowed by the darkness, but that put light into the darkness, right? And so by our lifestyles, we can continually bring more and more light out.
Interesting. I see here. So it's a combination of a bunch of religions, and I'm reminded of the Zoroastrianism. I think that's
Yes.
the religion with the eternal flame.
Yes.
Is that? And so I just as you talk, I'm thinking of this idea of the eternal flame, and I think it relates to what we're describing here. Soul, can it be destroyed? Can it be created? How much of it? I mean, if there is an eternal flame, and they have apparently a fire, in Persia, that it's like been burning since Zoroaster existed. I don't, maybe if it was snuffed out.
The Olympic torch is clearly a Zoroastrian tradition, right?
Yeah.
And bringing it and continuing to make sure it's lit and that it's been brought to the Hellenistic Empire from the Persians. I mean, that's the idea of keeping the eternal flame, and we still practice that today. So,
Yep. But I think we're practicing it now with this kind of spiritual discourse. The Buddhists have an idea of spiritual friends and spiritual conversation as a key part of the Dharma, the wheel of the Dharma. There's the pillars. I think the 3 pillars, and these kind of conversations. We're curious. We're seekers. I think there's a sense to find reality or truth. I mean, this is a part of keeping that flame alive. And the idea of an inner flame or an inner fire, and this seems to be some kind of core thing of everything we've talked about. Do we have a flame inside of us? Is that connected to whatever we want to call the divine, the oneness that we may have incarnated from or a part of? And it seems to be cross religion. I mean, there's this notion that's similar to this. And what would the alternative idea be? That we're just meaningless and that we're just like mud, and we came out like of like a little alligator, and then it's nothing going nowhere.
There's like the 3, right? You got like nihilism, which is fun, and I like it. It's adorable because honestly, out of nihilism comes postmodernism and some of the worst sitcoms in history. And I grew up in the 90s. But beyond nihilism, there's the idea that you're God given, or you're begotten, you're wholly begotten, and so you kind of owe for that. And then but I guess what's interesting to me about Manichaeism is it kind of this idea of the devil is either a product of the omnipotent God, or good and evil are dynamic. And so many people seem to treat good and evil as dynamic. It's like God and the devil are just as powerful as each other, even though culturally they don't believe. I just wonder what you think about that. Do you think good and evil are equal, or is there?
Can someone say God is omnipresent and omnipotent? And that's when I'm always like, logically I cannot follow anymore. If anyone's,
you got to watch Noel's talk. So Noel Kishore Das, who I had on my show, who just got his master's in Vedic studies, and it was really interesting talking about what omnipotence really is. Because if you're omnipotent, you have to have enough power to be not omnipotent. That has to be like, if you want to know, if you know everything, and you're omnipotent, do you have the power to not know everything? You have to be able to not know everything. If you are omnipresent, but you are omnipotent, do you have the power to not be omnipresent? You have to be able. So it's so weird to be the idea of being so powerful, you could be powerless. Because you are that powerful, you can do that, is part of that idea. It's so beyond, right?
Welcome to Earth.
But sorry, I mean, SJ, you were about to talk about dynamic versus,
Yeah, I think my sense, I guess, there's a programming. I think there's a program. This is where I like the Matrix, the world of the Matrix, where there's the architect and they're running programs, and it repeats with the agents and Neo. And they're kind of working together. It's embedded in the program. I think maybe it's part of my astrological cosmology, which is that we have these 7, and in the cosmic world the Gnostic world, they write about the 7 planets as 7 archons. It's part of a code or a programming of what we're in.
Angelic luminaries, right?
And so Yeah, so I mean, to me, yeah, the devil and the God that you're referring to that is maybe paired with the devil in this dance, I don't think that might not be actual the God above God. There's the God above God, which is the oneness. But within
Existence
that,
itself.
yeah, and then there's the programming that would include all kinds of the
Architects.
dance of the yin and the yang and the seven archons and all of these archetypes that you can tap into. You know, the OnlyFans model archetype. I mean, all of these archetypes that are just in our reality: beauty, sex, you know, wisdom, trickster. Like Dylan would be the trickster archetype. There are, you know, oligarchs. Those are just playing a role. Governments, you know, dictator. That's just an archetype that they've tapped into. There's the what is it? The NPC is just some people can choose that route.
Right.
I mean, and so that's how I tend to think that there's a dynamism within a programming, and it's a paradox, and we're all trying to kind of go to the God above God as much as we can while we're still contained within our bodily programming that we're seem to be decaying, except for that guy that's saying he's going to make his body like an 18-year-old by injecting his son's blood into him.
Oh my God, we should bring that guy up. I'm sorry.
But that's my sense. It's a paradox. Somehow we're dynamic, but we're also
The pictures are actually creepier than the thing itself. All right. I don't know why Joe Biden's in the picture, but I'm just kidding. That's his dad. So what's going on is he's injecting his blood into his dad, but he's injecting his son's blood into him. And, you know, that's got to be not a great thing for your plasma level. I mean, I think if I've known people that donated blood, and at some point, by the time you're 40, if you're doing this when you're 18, it's harder for you to reproduce new plasma. So he better hurry up and have his own kid. And I'm getting the feeling this is how they do it. Like, this is just, but this is rapid normalization. In case anyone hadn't read this, US CEO who had started Cash App, right? Is that right? Or did he start Venmo? He started Venmo.
Venmo.
Way more Facebook evil. Yeah. Spend $2 million a year for anti-aging. Now uses his teen son as he calls him, Blood Boy. Right. Yeah. So this is everything we talked about, all the QAnon stuff and the Pizzagate stuff. You know, we're all like, oh yeah, that's all a bunch of silly. But then here's what's normalization going on right now. So it's kind of like the straw man. Yeah, okay, we can point to the weakest straw and break it. But the strongest argument here seems to be hard to break, right? That they're doing this, that this exists.
And just, I would like to drop one last bit as we spoke about, time and incarnations and memory. So I've just been on a very interesting festival. I met an older lady. She had a very nice necklace. So I started talking with her.
Ooh, Rafael with the older lady.
No.
The necklace part.
Topic. Yeah, so apparently related to like Jasmine Houdin, if you know her, she's all going on about, this light fasting thing, not having to eat and so on. But the main point being that, very quickly we talk about history or something. And she's like, yeah, she's seen this translated versions by Knopfloch. He basically did, I think it was the Iwaranan series, or he basically translated some Tartaria series into German, got pretty popular with it. But her main point was that for years, ever since she was a child, she had dreams of some calamity of being mud flooded. And she never knew what it meant. She never knew what it was. And she had it for many, many years until finally recently. And she says she's been around quite some time. She saw that documentary. And from that day on, her nightmares were gone. So that's just another, like anecdotal, subjective confirmation that there is something to whatever happened there. If this kind of dream is implanted, let's say, right, even though she didn't know what to do with it, and especially if it's resolved when she's consciously realizing or being presented with a model of, okay, this actually is part of conscious reality.
I know it's kind of weird if you look at the fire festival in Pakistan for the last 1,000 years has been a mud festival, which is they're like, we have a very weird way of doing things here. It's like, really? Yeah, we like to rub ourselves in mud and make it look like the whole town was covered in mud in this major mudslide. It's just a cult. It's lost in translation why we do it. I don't know. It's okay. Brutal. Well, Anidia, I want to bring up because you brought up breatharianism just for a second. I mean, I'm not against the idea that you can get energy from the sun and from air, but I do remember that in Santa Cruz, California, where I'm from, there was a big breatharian movement. And then they caught the guy at a McDonald's eating a Big Mac, and he said it wasn't because he needed the nutrients; it was just for the taste. And so I've always been a little
McDonald's, you
skeptical.
could almost make the argument, but yeah, sure.
I was like, and that's why at 9 or 10 years old, I was like, I hear his point, but I don't know. So I've always been a little off on it, but it keeps coming up because I had a prejudice against it because of that as a child. And now the more I look into it, it's like, well, the Rosicrucians are obsessed with it. The Bhakti, the Mataji, like a lot of people in India.
Can I just say also as PSA, nobody should just stop eating and especially drinking. But
no medical advice here, but please don't stop
people
eating.
do research water fasting or even just the very traditional Christian or Muslim traditions of just eating less or whatever, not for some time, that's generally very healthy and detoxing. Though it can also trigger detox effects which may feel uncomfortable, but certainly recommended to deeply look into that. So
I think intermittent fasting is pretty cool. Not medical advice. I just think it's trendy. Look into that. I like what it does.
I like what it is too. Just
very
to be clear,
trendy.
I'm totally for fasting.
Right.
It's amazing stuff.
Well, I guess we could put the last thing I could pull up would be the NASA thing before I start showing you. Is there anything you wanted me to share? Because this is the last thing I was thinking of talking about, which was the UFO meeting.
I don't know about this. Yeah.
All right, we'll do this and afterwards than anything else. But so UFO, what we learned from NASA's public meeting, and I read through this and I read through all of the minutes, and basically we learned nothing. Well, nothing at all. All it is that NASA is going to continue to find out as much as they can while telling nothing to the public. That's basically what they said. They're like, we can't tell people, but we will continue to look into it a lot.
I just really hope that with advanced visual AI, they're gonna at least provide somewhat more fancy CGI than they did till now.
I want really the Zodiac. I want to just see the Zodiac. Like, and this up here is Orion, and then just do it. Like, why not? But do you think, where are we going with this? Because is this major push of reset simultaneous to disclosure, that there's more out there, that there's more in here, that there's, all of it. What do you think that they're going to, what's the narrative going to be? And also what's the truth of it? Are they going to tell us the truth?
You're familiar with the, was it Werner von Braun that said there will be a war, the alien war that's going to be part of, or there was some kind of, is it that?
Carol Rosin was his secretary, Carol Rosin, who did the statements,
But they say that there's, there it is. So, I mean, to me, I'm guessing it's already been war gamed, how you would just have let's just call it a narrativized crisis using these symbols. And I don't know, these are just the ideas that the Hollywood predictive programming has set us up to be ready for the deploying of this narrativized kind of war game, like a War of the Worlds. I'm open to that. I mean, I want to see the guys. I need some proof, man. I'm just going to be honest. Like, I want to see the ship. I'm going to need more to be convinced that it's not some kind of military sum up.
Of course.
That's where I'm at with it. That's my sense.
Okay. If there was something out there, do you think it's likely to be extraterrestrial, or do you think it's more like demons, like Buddhist spirit, like light being maybe? I mean, where are we going with this?
I think it's probably people that have access to code jumping and console jumping. Just to go back to the metaphor we said earlier, these are entities that are like coming from maybe the World on a Wire. They're coming from higher and then incarnating down here to where we are, or they're able to somehow, they know maybe more or are more sophisticated in their abilities to maneuver within higher levels of this code, this matrix. It's like in the Matrix, you have the character, the French guy who gives the cake, he can program that cake, the Merovingian. So there'll be I think it's more like this, people that have sophisticated tools to communicate with whatever we're in. And so that said, I'm not sure that what we're in is just what they tell us. So that even outer space is the way we would want to think about it, but that could be true. But it's more of the complexity of of what we're in and knowledge of that complexity. I
feel like the big reason flat earth is so popular is there's no way exactly what they're saying is true. Like, regardless of flat earth, they're just look at what they're telling us. I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah. And then they're like, that's the point.
That's most people that I see that are flat, that even look at that. It's just what you're saying. They know that what we've been told is maybe inaccurate. So they're open-minded to alternatives. And the flat earth people are so good at at their propaganda that's an easy
And all,
one to
yeah,
latch
just breaking. If you just all you had to do is break apart the official narrative, that's
Yeah.
easy to do. It's the whole creating an alternative thing. Okay, can I also ask you as a last favor? Do you want to tell us a little bit, astrologically speaking, about what would you recommend to the audience to do today and this month, like based on astrological
Okay,
information?
yeah, sure. Today and this month, the big story is that there's going to be a Venus retrograde. Venus will stay in the sign of Leo for 4 months, over 4 months. It happens every 18 months that Venus will stop. And from how we see it in the sky, and then it goes in the underworld, it's not visible. And then it's reborn as a morning star.
Wow.
And so that's the big story. What could it be? Love relationships, old lovers coming back. Watch out for that. It could be, delays or blocks of all kinds, appearance changes. You may cut your hair, cut your beard, whatever. The thing about it that's interesting to me, so there's this general idea we're about to have a Venus retrograde. Relationships, pleasure, appearance, beauty, adornment, music, all of that gets rebirthed, reborn and purified,
Wow.
but through maybe a period of delay and block. And
Gestation.
so by the time,
Gestation.
Gestation is a perfect way. It will be seeded by the sun at the inferior conjunction in August, and then you have the rebirth in September, where it'll be visible again if you're up early in the morning. But Venus and Mars will be together in Leo, and when they come together, it can be quite combustive. They were traveling together during the first phase of the Ukraine special military operation. And there was actually a Venus retrograde in Capricorn at the beginning of 2022 when that whole thing went off. And so I would just say, from less of an interpersonal, interpretive,
Straight
offering,
sync.
Yeah, you're going back to now maybe a summer of the wars ramping up. And so Venus will enter Leo in 6 days, and then it will be with Mars in the fire sign. Venus and Mars are planets of war. Someone was asking about Ishtar. This was the symbol of Venus in Babylon, and it's a warlike symbol. And so when Mars and Venus join, it can be very combustive and war-oriented. I'm a little nervous, frankly, about Ukraine, the ramping up. I think we're getting ready to even see, worst case, there's a talk of the largest NATO exercise on June 11th.
We didn't even talk about Turkey, but yeah, I mean, it's about to be weird. It's going to be really weird.
It's about to be really, really weird. And so that's all I would say astrologically. Be prepared for kind of a summer of, maybe love relationships as Venus and Mars get close. They don't actually meet, and then Venus goes retrograde. So maybe you're going to chase someone and it's cool. And then it's a delay, and you're, to let that person go.
Wow. You said also be careful about so getting back, you might get back together, or somebody might come back into your life. Be wary of that. Not just, don't look forward to it. Beware.
No, it might be what's needed. I mean, I've seen it literal. On the day of the retrograde station, the lover, hey, how are you? 5 years, no contact. And then there they are. And then, they might have another dance,
Well,
but
try to learn your lessons the first time, I always say. But if it works out, good for you all.
It's
Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, reviews are good. And sometimes we have to walk through the same relationship to learn the lesson.
That's true. You have to sometimes see, think, yeah, you can have to revisit to understand why you escaped the gulag. I want everyone to subscribe to SJ Anderson. Please go to his YouTube channel. Click on the subscription button here. He's making amazing videos. He's got shorts, he's got lives, he's got everything you need. And it's actually great. Jim does some tarot stuff. I want to get you guys both on together, Jim Kincaid, you, and also get you back with David Plate on Think Tank. Let's do some more stuff. Anytime you want to talk about astrology and current events, I think they marry well. And then, so make sure you're subscribed on Twitter, because he's got a lot of good stuff, and it's going right into the sync book. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Also, I missed your website. Sorry. He's got this is if you're, his more work-oriented website, sjAnderson144.com, and you can schedule an appointment if you want to get actually a decent astrological reading from someone you can trust. And, these are practical readings. These are, what he said so far is very specific. I think you'll enjoy that. And if you're not even interested in astrology, all the more reason to talk to some of the people I trust in astrology to give you a different idea of that. And then please go to Act Like You Know 26, subscribe to Rafael's YouTube channel, And you can click on the videos here. He's got translations of the Xirtus Tartary documentary that we did and several of the other videos in German. So if you have people that speak German, this is a great way to get them a native lesson. He also has awesome conversations with David Ewing Jr., a lot of stuff that hasn't been covered in other places. This is an exclusive place to get some of this information. Amita, I've done some talks with David Ewing Jr., but I think there are even some better ones here. So I hope that you take the time to subscribe to Act Like You Know. 26, my boy, Rafael. Yeah.
Everyone, in this case then, well, share, like, subscribe. I'm pretty sure already are subscribed to Xirtus. TartaryNova.com, Andreas.me.
Please do. I should really flaunt that harder. You're right. I mean, just owning Andreas.
Sure.
Come
What's
on.
the best merch right now? Show us the Tartaria shirt merch.
Oh gosh, you're right. You can get some pretty cool Xirtus stuff if you go there. There's so many good things. I don't really grift it hard enough. You're right. But not only is my stuff historical, occult, esoteric, it's also hyper fashionable. I feel like you could wear this in any major city or around the world, and they'll be like, "Who are you wearing?" And you'll be like, "Xirtus." You know, that's the goal here. You can also get a really cool Xirtus yoga mat, so that you in a beach towel. We got a lot going on there. So, yeah, Xirtus it up.
I like that QR code. That's on the sweater, right? That's part of the design. That's cool.
Yeah, QR code everywhere you go. I got QR code shirts, QR codes. I like them. I mean, I tried QR codes like 20 years ago and no one got it. And I'm like, thank God that caught on, because that was my favorite fad I feel like we missed out on. All right. I love you guys. And I hope that we do this again soon. SJ, let's be in touch. Let's do Sync Tank soon.
Love it.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, peace. Okay.
Peace.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.